It all started on a day that seemed completely ordinary. HFY teen was running late for school, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders as he rushed past the crowded hallways, dodging groups of chatting students and the occasional teacher trying to corral chaos. He barely noticed the long line at the entrance or the announcements echoing through the speakers. But that ordinary day was about to take a turn that no one could have predicted. In the first class of the morning, a test was handed out that would change everything. Not just any test. This one came with instructions that sent a shiver down HFY teen's spine. List 3 ways to kill, the paper said. The words stared back at him, cold and clinical. The room buzzed with murmurs. Students exchanged nervous glances, some joking nervously, others just staring at the paper as if it might vanish if they didn't look too closely. HFY teen felt a strange mix of curiosity and unease. He took a deep breath, trying to focus. Instead of sticking to the 3 ways the test asked for, he started writing. And then he didn't stop at 3, 5, 10, 20. Ideas poured out of him, each one stranger and more creative than the last. By the time he hit number 30, the room had grown silent. The teacher, an elderly man who had seen countless students stumble over assignments, walked slowly to HFY teen's desk. He picked up the paper, adjusted his glasses, and scanned the list. And then, right there in the middle of the classroom, he fainted. HFY teen blinked in shock. What had he written? What on earth was on number 4? That single number had flipped the entire classroom upside down. Shaking off the disbelief, HFY teen gathered his things and left the classroom, still trying to make sense of the chaos he'd accidentally caused. The hallways outside felt quieter, almost surreal. That's when he noticed her, a pregnant white woman struggling with a heavy bag on the bench near the lockers. Something inside him nudged him to act. Without thinking too much, he offered his seat. She smiled, a small but warm smile that seemed to carry more weight than the bag she was holding. Then she handed him a note, just a simple piece of paper, but the words on it were unlike anything HFY teen had ever read. They spoke of courage, of choices, of consequences that could ripple far beyond a single day in school. He held it in his hands, heart racing as the woman walked away. And that's when HFY teen realized something. This day was not about tests or fainting teachers, or even random acts of kindness. It was about a message he had been given, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him. The note wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a spark. And the fire it would ignite? Well, that was something he wasn't ready for yet. As he stood there in the hallway, the weight of the note pressing against his palm, he knew one thing for certain. Life was about to get a lot stranger. And the next steps he took would determine whether he stumbled or soared. And right at that moment, as the bell rang and students poured around him like a river, he couldn't escape. HFY teen looked down at the note one more time. Number 4 on the test, the fainted teacher, the stranger who handed him wisdom. It all felt connected, but how? And what would happen when the truth behind that note finally revealed itself? The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before him, full of unanswered questions and possibilities that made his stomach twist with anticipation. And that, my friends, is where our story pauses. Right on the edge of discovery, danger, and something entirely unexpected. FY teen slipped into the nearest empty classroom to catch his breath. The note still trembled slightly in his hands as if it had a heartbeat of its own. He unfolded it carefully, afraid that any sudden movement might erase its message. The handwriting was neat, almost elegant, with looping letters that carried a strange sense of authority. Each word seemed to pull him in, demanding attention yet resisting full understanding. He had no idea who the woman was or why she had singled him out. Maybe it was luck, maybe it was fate. But deep down, HFY teen felt that it was something bigger, something that was now part of him whether he wanted it or not. The hallways had returned to normal, students laughing and shoving each other like nothing unusual had happened. Yet for him, everything had changed in a single heartbeat. As he read the note again, his mind wandered back to the morning. The test, number 4, the teacher fainting. That single moment had been surreal, almost cinematic, like something pulled straight from a storybook he'd never thought could touch his life. What he had written, he didn't fully remember each detail. The ideas had come so fast that they seemed almost dreamlike. But one thing was clear. The teacher's reaction wasn't just shock. It was fear. Real human fear That realization made HFY teen shiver. He slid down against the wall, letting his backpack fall to the floor. The day had started as normal, but now it felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking into a world he hadn't known existed. A world that whispered secrets he hadn't been ready to hear. The note pressed against his fingers again, and he realized he had been holding it like a lifeline without even noticing. Maybe that was exactly what it was. FY teen tried to think back to his life before this day, before the note, before the fainted teacher. He was just another teenager, juggling schoolwork, friends, and the occasional video game marathon. He hadn't imagined himself at the center of something strange or meaningful. He hadn't imagined that a single act, offering a seat, could spiral into something that made him feel both powerful and terrified at the same time. He remembered the woman's smile, the quiet way she had handed him the note. There had been no words, no explanation, just the weight of trust in her eyes. He didn't even know her name. She had disappeared into the crowd before he could ask anything. That lack of answers made everything feel more urgent. It was as if the universe had tossed him a puzzle without giving him the instructions. And somehow he sensed that this puzzle wasn't just about him. It was about something larger, something that might change more than just his day. As the lunch bell rang, HFY teen found himself wandering the school corridors without any real destination. The note felt heavier now, almost like it was alive, nudging him to pay attention, to look closer at the world around him. He noticed things he had never seen before. The way the janitor's broom scratched rhythmically against the tiles, the tiny crack in the cafeteria window that let a sliver of sunlight through, and the faint hum of conversations that seemed to carry secrets if he listened closely. He tried to focus on normal life, to act like any other student. But every glance he cast seemed to pull his mind back to the note, to the woman, and to the list he had written on the test. Questions spun in his head like a whirlwind. Why did number 4 provoke such a reaction? Was it coincidence that he had been given the note immediately afterward? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do with it? FY teen's phone buzzed in his pocket, a distraction from the swirl of thoughts. A message from his best friend popped up. "Dude, did you see Mr. Harris? He literally passed out in class, LOL. Are you okay?" FY teen stared at the screen. His friend didn't know the half of it. If only he could tell someone, but even speaking the words aloud felt impossible. How do you explain something that seems unreal even to yourself? How do you explain the strange weight of destiny pressing down on your shoulders when the world around you is moving on as if nothing has happened? He slipped the note into his pocket and walked slowly to the cafeteria. The noise and chatter felt distant, almost like he was underwater. Every glance from other students felt sharper, almost suspicious, though he couldn't tell why. His senses had shifted. The day had cracked open, revealing hidden layers that he had never noticed. He noticed the way people's expressions flickered, how small gestures carried meanings he couldn't yet read. He realized that maybe he had been blind before, unaware of how much more there was to see. As he picked up his lunch tray, he noticed a group of students staring at him. He didn't recognize any of them, yet there was something about the way they watched that felt deliberate, calculated. One of them whispered to another, pointing subtly in his direction. FY teen felt a flicker of unease. Was it because of what had happened in class? Or was it connected to the note, the fainting teacher, the list he had written? He couldn't be sure, but the feeling of being watched made the cafeteria suddenly feel too small, too crowded, too loud. FY teen decided to leave before anyone could approach him. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves mixed with gasoline from passing cars. He wandered toward the edge of the school grounds, finding a quiet spot by the old oak tree that had stood there for decades. Sitting down, he finally allowed himself to study the note in detail again. The message was short but strangely layered, almost like a riddle. It spoke about choices, courage, and the ripple effect of even the smallest actions. It hinted that HFY teen had been noticed not by accident but for a reason. It hinted that what he had done that morning in the classroom had triggered something far beyond the walls of the school. His mind raced as he tried to connect the dots. Was the test designed to reveal something about him? Was the woman a messenger? Or was he imagining it all, desperately seeking meaning in randomness? Even as he wrestled with these questions, HFY teen couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. A subtle shift in the shadows near the oak tree made him glance up, heart pounding. Nothing was there, Yet the sensation lingered, a reminder that the day had changed him in ways he couldn't yet understand. Something was waiting, something connected to the note, to the fainted teacher, to number 4 on that strange test. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the school grounds, HFY teen knew that the ordinary world he had known no longer existed. He had stepped into a story that was unfolding around him, one where every choice, every glance, every word could carry consequences he couldn't yet predict. And somewhere in the distance, he felt the faint pull of destiny, nudging him forward, daring him to uncover what lay beyond the ordinary, beyond the safe, beyond everything he thought he knew. He folded the note carefully and tucked it back into his pocket, heart racing with anticipation. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. And as the first hints of evening settled over the school grounds, HFY teen realized that the answers he sought were not yet ready to reveal themselves. The mystery was just beginning. FY teen couldn't shake the feeling that the day had shifted into a different dimension, one where ordinary rules no longer applied. As he walked home, the note pressed into his pocket like a hidden pulse. He replayed the events in his mind. The fainted teacher, the list of 30 ways to kill number 4. It all seemed like a puzzle with pieces missing. And he had a sinking suspicion that he had stumbled into something far bigger than a single classroom prank or bizarre test. At home, his parents were busy in the kitchen, chatting about mundane things, completely unaware of the storm brewing in their son's life. HFY teen set his backpack down and tried to act casual, but his mind was already racing. He replayed every interaction from the day, searching for patterns. Who was the woman? Why had she chosen him? And what exactly was he supposed to do with the cryptic note? Later that evening, HFY teen opened his laptop, hoping for a distraction in the form of games or videos. But even the glowing screen couldn't pull his thoughts away. He found himself staring at online forums about strange tests, mysterious strangers, and unusual coincidences. Some threads were obviously fake, filled with over-the-top speculation, but others struck a nerve. Stories that seemed too eerily similar to his day to be random. One user even mentioned a test with the same prompt, list ways to kill, and described a teacher fainting after reading the 4th entry. HFY teen froze. Someone else had experienced this, but who and why? The next morning he returned to school with a new determination. He needed answers, and he had a feeling that if he stayed passive, the mystery would only grow. As he walked through the hallways, he noticed subtle changes. Students glanced at him, some curiously, some with barely concealed suspicion. He caught whispers that stopped the moment he looked their way. And then he noticed the principal's assistant watching him from across the hall, expression unreadable. It wasn't paranoia. Something was definitely different today. HFY teen found a quiet corner in the library, hoping to gather his thoughts. He pulled out the note once more, reading it carefully. Each sentence seemed to have layers, like a code waiting to be deciphered. One line caught his attention. The choices you make today will echo tomorrow, in ways you cannot yet see. He couldn't shake the feeling that the teacher's fainting wasn't an isolated event. It was a warning, a signal, or maybe even the beginning of something dangerous. His friend, Jay, found him there, sliding into the seat across from him. "Dude, you're acting weird," Jay said. "Everyone's talking about the test. People are saying Mr. Harris might actually quit. Did you do something to him?" FY teen hesitated. Could he tell Jay about the note? About number 4? It felt impossible, like revealing a secret meant to remain hidden until the right moment. So instead he shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe he just fainted. Heat or something." Jay frowned, unconvinced. "Yeah, right. You've got that look. Like you've seen something." HFY teen swallowed, feeling the weight of the note again. He didn't know if he wanted to drag his best friend into this mess, but at the same time, he realized that keeping it to himself was becoming harder with every passing hour. Later that afternoon, he noticed something strange while walking past the auditorium. A flyer had been posted about a school event that no one had mentioned. A critical thinking challenge, open to select students, supposedly for those with exceptional insight. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be connected? He had never considered himself exceptional, but the test, the fainted teacher, the mysterious note, they all seemed like invitations into a hidden world. a world that didn't follow the rules of ordinary school life. FY Teen's curiosity collided with unease as he approached the auditorium after class. Inside, shadows clung to the corners of the room, the light dim and flickering. The seats were mostly empty, but a few students lingered, whispering quietly, glancing at him as he passed. It felt deliberate, like he had entered a stage before the audience had been told the show had started. He noticed the woman again, standing near the back, holding a clipboard. She didn't approach him, but her eyes locked onto his for a brief moment, and in that instant, he understood something. She was part of whatever was unfolding, a guide or a gatekeeper, but not someone who would hand him the answers outright. HFY Teen's pulse quickened. Every instinct told him to approach, but every caution whispered to wait. Then came the first hint of real danger. As he moved closer, he overheard a student muttering to another. "Did you hear? He wrote 30, that's not normal. Something's wrong with him." HFY Teen froze. The whispers were growing louder, more focused. The list, the note, the fainting teacher. They had made him a target, or at least someone people were watching. And the thought made his stomach twist with a mix of fear and exhilaration. By the time he left the auditorium, the tension had followed him into the hallways. Students were quieter now, but every glance felt like a calculation, every whisper a ripple of judgment. He realized that the conflict wasn't just about understanding the note or the fainted teacher. It was about navigating a world suddenly filled with hidden agendas, unspoken rules, and secrets that demanded discovery at the cost of comfort or safety. That evening, HFY Teen sat on his bed, the note once again in his hands. He couldn't sleep. He kept picturing number 4, the way the teacher had collapsed, the way the woman had silently entrusted him with something beyond comprehension. He realized that the main conflict wasn't just external. It was internal. He had been thrust into a situation where every choice mattered, where hesitation could mean missing critical moments, and where understanding the invisible threads connecting people and events was now part of surviving the school, the note, and whatever larger force was moving around him. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. HFY Teen's heart jumped. Who could it be at this hour? He opened the door cautiously to find Jay standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide. "Dude, I think we need to talk," he said, voice low. "There's something weird going on. I saw some people at school following you. And this sounds crazy, but I think they're not just curious. They know about number 4. They know you wrote the list." HFY Teen's hands shook slightly as he realized the scope of the problem. It wasn't just the teacher, the test, or the note. It was a network of people, perhaps even forces, who were aware of what he had done, and somehow the woman, the note, and the fainting incident were all part of it. His mind raced. Was this about testing him? Watching him? Or something far more complicated that he couldn't even begin to understand? Jay glanced at the note sticking out of HFY Teen's pocket. "What is that?" "You've got to tell me." HFY Teen hesitated, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The note was more than a message. It was a key, a warning, and a challenge all at once, and yet he knew that sharing it might put them both in danger, or accelerate events in ways he couldn't control. He swallowed, staring at his best friend, knowing that everything was about to change, and that the true conflict was only beginning. Outside, the world seemed calm, ordinary even. But HFY Teen knew better now. A storm was coming, one that would test his courage, his wit, and his understanding of the choices he had already made, and the ones he had yet to face. FY Teen couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, even inside his own room. The note in his pocket seemed to pulse with an invisible energy, a reminder that the ordinary rules no longer applied. Every sound outside, the rustle of leaves, a distant car horn, even the subtle creak of his bedroom floor, made him jump. He tried to focus, tried to make sense of the chaos, but the threads of the day tangled tighter with every passing minute. Jay sat across from him, eyes darting nervously toward the window. "I don't know what's happening," he whispered. "People at school, they're not just curious anymore. I saw one of them, following me when I went to grab snacks. And the way they look at you, it's like they're expecting something to happen." HFY Teen nodded slowly, a chill crawling up his spine. The fainted teacher, the list of 30, number 4, the note, and now the strange attention from unknown students. It all felt like a trap being carefully set, and he was standing in the center without a map. He pulled the note from his pocket again, unfolding it carefully. The words seemed to shift under his gaze, as if alive. One line caught his attention, a whisper of warning. "Trust what you see, but beware what you don't." His heart pounded. It was both a promise and a threat. The woman, the list, the fainting, none of it was random. And the closer he got to the answers, the closer the danger came. Teen and Jay decided to investigate. They started with the classroom where it all began, hoping to find some clue in the wreckage left behind by the fainted teacher. The room was empty now, the test papers collected, but the air still held a faint tension like the remnants of shock. Teen walked to his old desk and ran his fingers over the surface, imagining what number 4 had meant to cause such a reaction. Every instinct told him to leave, but curiosity burned brighter than fear. As they left the classroom, Teen noticed subtle changes in the hallways. Students moved quickly, some glancing at him with more than curiosity, a few with worry, others with something unreadable, something calculating. Shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. Corners felt tighter, and every doorway could hide an observer. He realized that he was no longer navigating school as it used to be. The school itself felt like it had become a stage, and he was a performer who didn't yet know the script. They made their way to the auditorium, drawn by the flyer about the critical thinking challenge. The room was dim, and the few students present seemed to be waiting, watching. Teen felt an odd thrill. This was the first time he felt like he was part of something bigger, though he wasn't sure if it was good or bad. The woman from before stood at the back, clipboard in hand, eyes calm and steady as if she had been expecting him. Teen's gaze swept the room. Something about the way the other students watched him made his stomach tighten. They whispered in low tones, but he caught fragments. "Number 4. He's different. Did you see how the teacher—" It was clear that whatever he had set in motion, it wasn't contained. And it was spreading. A sudden loud knock on the auditorium door made Teen jump. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a tall figure dressed in dark clothing. Their face was obscured, but the presence alone made Teen's heart race. The figure's gaze swept over the room, lingering on him longer than comfortable. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Jay gripped Teen's arm tightly, his own eyes wide with alarm. "Who are they?" Jay whispered, barely audible. Teen shook his head. He didn't know. But the figure's presence confirmed something he had suspected. There was more at play than tests and notes. Someone was orchestrating events, and he was at the center. The woman at the back of the room stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "He's ready," she said. Teen's heart skipped. Ready for what? He wanted to ask, but the words died in his throat. Her eyes met his, and he felt both reassurance and warning in that single look. This was the moment things were about to escalate, and the choice he made next could change everything. The students in the room began moving toward him, forming a sort of semicircle. Whispers rose and fell, a rhythm that seemed to echo the tension building inside him. Teen realized that everyone here was part of a test far larger than a classroom challenge. And the note, the fainted teacher, the list of 30, everything was connected. But connected how? And to what? Suddenly the lights flickered and dimmed, casting strange shadows across the room. The air felt heavy, almost electric, and Teen could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Jay looked at him, pale and tense. "We should leave," he said. But Teen knew it wasn't that simple. Running now would mean abandoning the questions, abandoning the chance to understand what he had been thrust into. The tall figure in dark clothing moved closer, stopping just at the edge of the semicircle. Teen could feel the weight of their gaze like it was pressing into him, testing him. And then he realized the conflict wasn't just external. It was about him, about the choices he had made, the curiosity he had followed, and the courage he had yet to summon. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, yet another part of him burned with a fierce need to stay, to face what was coming. The note in his pocket seemed to vibrate slightly, like a warning, like a promise. Number 4 flashed in his mind. The fainted teacher, the shock, the ripple of events that had followed. It was all leading here. And then, in that charged silence, the woman stepped forward once more. "The time has come," she said, voice carrying across the room. Teen's pulse raced. "You will see the consequences of your actions, but only if you're ready to face them." The shadows in the room seemed to shift, and for the first time, HFY teen felt truly on the edge. Every whisper, every glance, every heartbeat had been building to this moment. He knew that once he stepped forward, there would be no turning back. The tension was unbearable, thick enough to touch. And yet the resolution, the answers he craved, remained just out of reach. Jay squeezed his arm, a reminder that he wasn't alone. Yet HFY teen realized that the choices, the danger, the discovery, they were his alone to face. Every nerve in his body screamed that the climax was imminent, that the hidden world he had stumbled into was about to reveal its first real truth. And he could feel it. The moment of revelation was almost upon him. But what would it reveal? And at what cost? The room seemed to hold its breath. HFY teen's fingers brushed the note one last time before slipping it back into his pocket. Shadows danced across the walls, whispers grew louder, and the tall figure stepped even closer. Everything was poised on a knife's edge, teetering between danger and discovery, between fear and courage, between the ordinary world he had known and the extraordinary path that awaited him. And in that instant, with the weight of the unknown pressing from every side, HFY teen knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. FY teen froze as the tall figure finally spoke, voice low but sharp. "You think this was just about the test?" The word sliced through the thick silence like a blade. The room seemed to shift around him, the shadows deepening, and for the first time, HFY teen realized that the entire scenario, the teacher fainting, the list of 30, even the note might have been only the beginning of something far more dangerous. Before he could respond, the woman at the back of the room stepped forward again, clipboard in hand. "It's not just you who's being tested," she said calmly, almost too calmly. "Everyone here has a part to play, some more willingly than others." HFY teen's eyes darted around the room and his stomach dropped. He recognized several of the students. They weren't just classmates, they were watching him. Some had subtle smirks, others neutral faces, but all of them were waiting, aware of something he wasn't. Jay leaned close, whispering urgently, "What do you mean? Who else is part of this?" But HFY teen couldn't answer. He didn't know. The weight of the note in his pocket felt heavier, as if it had grown in importance overnight. He began to wonder, had the pregnant woman's gesture, the life-changing note, been a warning, or an invitation into something even bigger than he imagined? Then the tall figure moved suddenly, reaching into a pocket and pulling out a small device. FY teen's pulse raced as the device clicked on, projecting a holographic map above the center of the auditorium. Pins and lines appeared, connecting locations around the school and even beyond it. Classrooms, hallways, even seemingly ordinary spots outside the building were marked with symbols he didn't recognize, and at the very center of it, glowing brighter than anything else, was a single red dot. Him. "You are not just being tested on knowledge," the figure said. "You are being evaluated on awareness, intuition, and decision-making under pressure." Number 4 was the first step. The real challenge is now. HFY teen's head spun. He had thought the conflict was about a bizarre test or a fainted teacher, maybe even just curiosity. But now it was clear that the stakes were much higher. Someone or something was orchestrating events, tracking him, observing his choices, and judging him based on decisions he hadn't even realized were part of the test. Jay looked over his shoulder at the hologram, face pale. This is insane. They know everywhere we go?" HFY teen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he focused on the glowing red dot. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. And then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. A second red dot had appeared on the map. It moved slowly, deliberately toward his position. Not a student. Not a teacher. Something else. Something unknown. The woman's voice cut through his panic. "That dot represents a variable. Someone who can change everything. Your next decision will determine whether you and those around you remain safe, or whether the consequences spiral beyond your control." HFY teen felt the room spin. He had been caught in a storm of events, each more confusing than the last, but this was different. This was direct, immediate, and for the first time, the fainted teacher, the note, and even the pregnant woman's gesture seemed like pieces of a much larger puzzle, one where the consequences weren't just academic or social, but potentially life-altering. A sudden noise at the back of the auditorium made him jump. Someone or something was moving quickly through the shadows. The other students didn't react, their eyes fixed on him, expectant, calculating. Jeff Whiteen realized he had become the center of attention not by choice but because the entire game had been designed around him. The tall figure's gaze locked onto his. The next step isn't optional. You will have to act. Hesitation will have consequences. H.F. Whiteen's mind raced, thinking back to the note, to number 4, to the fainted teacher. Every hint he had received, every cryptic line, every subtle warning, the pieces were all pointing toward this moment. And yet he still didn't know the rules, the purpose, or the full danger. Jay grabbed his arm, panic clear in his voice. "We need to get out of here now." H.F. Whiteen shook his head, feeling a strange mix of fear and resolve. Running wouldn't solve this. If anything, it would accelerate the unknown consequences. He had to face whatever was coming, even if it meant stepping into something he didn't fully understand. Then came the second twist, the thing that truly made his stomach drop. From the shadows at the far end of the room, a student stepped forward, smiling in a way that felt wrong. "I know what number 4 is," they said softly, almost tauntingly. "And I know what happens if you don't act." Their eyes gleamed, unnervingly calm. Jeff Whiteen felt a chill. This wasn't just about tests anymore. Someone here knew more than they should. Someone who could manipulate the game he hadn't even realized he was part of. The holographic map flickered suddenly, and new dots appeared, moving fast, converging toward the center. H.F. Whiteen could feel the room tighten around him, like invisible walls pressing closer. The tension in the air was suffocating. Every whisper and movement magnified. Every choice he had made up to this point suddenly felt fragile, like a single misstep could unravel everything. The woman stepped closer again, voice calm but firm. "The variable is approaching. You must decide your next move carefully. One action, one word, one hesitation, it could change the outcome for everyone." H.F. Whiteen's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the note again. It had brought him this far, but he knew instinctively that the next step would demand more than intuition or courage. It would demand strategy, awareness, and trust. Trust in himself, and perhaps in others who had remained silent until now. As the dots on the map moved closer, the shadows in the room seemed to twist unnaturally. Every heartbeat felt louder than the last. Whiteen realized that the climax, the moment where everything collided, was almost here. But the real danger, the true test, wasn't just about facing the unknown. It was about understanding the rules hidden in plain sight, about predicting moves in a game he had only just begun to comprehend. And then the unexpected happened. A loud, metallic click echoed through the auditorium. The lights flickered violently, casting the room into near darkness. When the lights returned, one of the students, someone H.F. Whiteen had never noticed before, was missing. The room fell silent, the shadows stretching as if alive. H.F. Whiteen knew instantly that the game had just changed, and that the stakes were now higher than ever. The tall figure's voice cut sharply through the tension. "You've been warned. The next choice is yours. Choose wisely, or everything will change." H.F. Whiteen's heart pounded. He glanced at Jay, at the students, at the map, at the shadows, and realized that the test, the note number 4, the fainted teacher, the mysterious woman, and now the missing student were all pieces of the same puzzle. But the puzzle's final picture, the true danger, and the cost of failure were still hidden, waiting to reveal themselves at the moment he acted. Every instinct told him to hesitate, to step back, to question everything. And every instinct told him that hesitation itself could be fatal. The tension was unbearable. The stakes were sky high, and the audience, if they were watching, would be holding their breath, wondering what H.F. Whiteen would do next. H.F. Whiteen's heart raced as the dots on the holographic map converged, the shadows in the auditorium twisting unnaturally around him. Every instinct screamed that this was the moment. He had to act, and he had to act fast. He glanced at Jay, who nodded nervously, his eyes wide with fear and trust. F. Whiteen took a deep breath, trying to steady his mind. The note in his pocket felt warm, almost like it was guiding him, urging him forward. He stepped to the center of the semicircle, the gaze of every student and the tall figure pressing down on him. The woman at the back of the room watched silently, expression unreadable. Whiteen knew the stakes. Every decision, every word, every movement mattered now. He opened the note and read the line that had seemed cryptic all this time. "Trust what you see, but beware what you don't." Suddenly, the hidden student who had disappeared earlier reappeared at the edge of the auditorium. H.F. Whiteen's pulse skipped. The student's eyes were wide, almost pleading. "It's not what it seems," they shouted. Number 4, it's not just a step on a test. It's a reflection. Everything here is testing your judgment, your choices, your integrity. Kef Whiteen froze, realization dawning. Number 4 wasn't dangerous in itself. It was a mirror to reveal how he responded under pressure, how far he could push himself while staying true to what he believed was right. The fainted teacher, the 30 ways, the shadows, even the mysterious dots on the map, they were all part of an elaborate lesson designed not to harm, but to expose weakness and strength. He swallowed hard and turned to the tall figure. "So all of this is a test?" he asked. The figure's shadowed face lifted slightly, the first hint of a smile appearing. "Yes, but tests have consequences. Your choice now will define everything. Do you act selfishly or do you act with responsibility? That is the ultimate challenge." HF Whiteen glanced at Jay, at the students, and at the glowing red dot representing himself. A surge of clarity washed over him. The life-changing note, the pregnant woman giving him a chance to make a decision in the bus earlier. It all led to this. He realized he couldn't just play along. He had to make the choice that aligned with who he was. He stepped forward, raising his voice so that everyone in the room could hear. "The test isn't about fear. It's about responsibility. If anyone here is in danger or if something goes wrong because of me, I'll take responsibility, but I won't let this fear control me. I choose to act for the good of everyone, not just myself." For a moment, the room went silent. The dots on the holographic map stopped moving. The shadows seemed to shrink. And then, the tall figure nodded. Slowly, deliberately. "Very well," they said. "You have passed the true test. Number 4 was never a threat. It was your decision-making under pressure that mattered most. You've demonstrated awareness, courage, and integrity. Well done." The tension in the room dissolved gradually. The students relaxed, some clapping softly. Jay let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The hologram disappeared. The shadows receded, and the oppressive weight that had hung in the auditorium lifted. HF Whiteen felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion, the adrenaline leaving him in waves. But just as he thought it was over, the woman stepped forward, smiling softly. "One final note," she said. Kef Whiteen froze. "Tests don't always end with clear answers. Sometimes they leave doors open, for growth, for curiosity, for what comes next." She handed him a small envelope. Kef Whiteen's hands trembled as he took it. He looked at Jay, who gave him an encouraging nod. Inside the envelope was a single card. On it, written in elegant handwriting, were 2 words: "You've begun." HF Whiteen's eyes widened. Everything he had gone through, the test, the fainted teacher, the 30 ways, the shadows, the note, all of it was not the end. It was only the beginning of something bigger, something he couldn't yet understand. And though he had passed, he now realized that every choice, every action, and every moment of courage would matter more than ever in the days to come. He looked around the auditorium one last time, noticing small details he had missed before. A subtle glance exchanged between students, a faint mark on the wall, a shadow lingering longer than it should. The world he had known, the school, the classroom, the ordinary life, was gone. In its place was a new reality, one full of questions, challenges, and opportunities. Kef Whiteen slipped the card into his pocket and exhaled slowly. The weight of the unknown pressed down, but he felt ready. Somehow he knew that the life-changing note, the mysterious figures, and even number 4 had prepared him for what lay ahead. And just as he stepped toward the exit, ready to face the next challenge, a sudden flicker of movement at the doorway made him pause. A shadow detached itself from the wall. Not the tall figure, not any of the students. Kef Whiteen's heart skipped a beat. This was new, unexpected, and entirely unknown. Whoever or whatever it was, it had waited until the moment he thought it was over. And just like that, the story wasn't finished. The climax had come, the main conflicts resolved, but the final twist, the one that would change everything, had just arrived. Kef Whiteen's journey, it seemed, was only beginning. Kef Whiteen's eyes followed the shadow as it moved closer, but instead of fear, he felt a strange sense of calm. Somehow he knew it wasn't here to harm him. The envelope in his pocket, the life-changing note, and everything he had experienced over the past few days had sharpened his instincts. He had learned to trust his judgment, his awareness, and even his courage. And in this moment, that clarity was exactly what he needed. The shadow stepped fully into the light, revealing itself not as a threat, but as one of the teachers who had been quietly observing from the sidelines. Chef Whiteen blinked, realizing that even now there were lessons hidden in plain sight. "You've done well," the teacher said, voice gentle but firm. The test was never about fear. It was about seeing potential, making choices, and understanding responsibility. "You've proven yourself." HF Whiteen nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. The fainted instructor, the bizarre questions, the 30 ways to do something impossible. It had all been designed to challenge more than just knowledge. It had challenged his character, his patience, and his ability to make decisions when the stakes were high. And through it all, he hadn't just survived, he had grown. Jay let out a laugh that was equal parts relief and disbelief. "I still can't believe that was real," he said, glancing around the now empty auditorium. "I thought number 4 was going to be. I don't even know what I thought it was going to be." HF Whiteen chuckled, feeling the tension finally drain away. "It wasn't about what we thought. It was about what we did when we didn't know. That's what mattered." The students who had seemed so composed during the test began to relax, sharing looks that suggested unspoken understanding. They had all been part of the challenge, each one contributing in their own way to the unfolding events. HF Whiteen realized that the strange dynamics, the hidden observations, and even the moments of panic had all been lessons in empathy, awareness, and teamwork. As they exited the auditorium, HF Whiteen paused to think about the pregnant woman who had given him the life-changing note. Her gesture had been small in action but immense in impact. It reminded him that sometimes even simple acts of kindness or guidance could ripple into something much bigger. The note had been more than instructions. It had been trust, belief, and a nudge toward the best version of himself. Outside, the school grounds were quiet in the golden light of late afternoon. The ordinary noise of students walking, chatting, and laughing contrasted sharply with the extraordinary events that had just unfolded inside. HF Whiteen breathed in the cool air, letting the relief settle in. He felt proud, not of finishing a test, but of how he had handled himself, how he had made choices under pressure, and how he had stayed true to his instincts. He noticed Jay walking beside him, carrying a backpack that suddenly felt lighter than it had in days. "So, what now?" Jay asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Whiteen smiled, tucking the envelope safely into his bag. "Now we take what we learned and keep moving forward. That's the real test, isn't it? Life isn't about one big moment, it's about every choice, every chance we get to do the right thing." Jay nodded thoughtfully, and for a moment the two of them just walked in silence, taking in the ordinary yet comforting world around them. The echoes of the challenges inside the school seemed distant now, almost like a dream, but HF Whiteen knew the lessons would stay with him forever. As they reached the bus stop, Chef Whiteen spotted the pregnant woman from earlier, smiling warmly at him from across the street. She waved briefly before continuing on her path. HF Whiteen felt gratitude well up inside him. Her small act, the note, and the faith she had placed in a stranger had changed his day, his thinking, and perhaps even his future. He realized that sometimes life handed you lessons in unexpected ways, through people who barely knew you but somehow understood exactly what you needed. That evening, as HF Whiteen reflected on the events in his room, he revisited the note one last time. Its words seemed even clearer now. Trust what you see, but beware what you don't. He understood that life would always be full of moments where the rules weren't obvious, where fear and doubt could cloud judgment. But he also knew that by trusting himself, staying aware and acting with integrity, he could face anything, even when it seemed impossible. He glanced at the holographic map in his memory, the shadows, the dots, and the invisible lessons that had guided him. The challenges had been intense, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying, but they had also been opportunities, moments that forced him to grow, to reflect, and to see the world differently. HF Whiteen realized that the test wasn't over. It never truly is. But he now had the tools to face the future with confidence. Before going to sleep that night, he placed the card from the envelope on his desk, letting it rest beside his notebook. It was a reminder, not just of the challenges he had faced, but of the choices that lay ahead, the responsibility he carried, and the potential he now recognized within himself. Life might throw unexpected tests at him again, but he was ready. He had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of it. And wisdom wasn't knowing all the answers, it was knowing how to face the unknown with honesty, integrity, and heart. FY Teen closed his eyes, letting the events of the day settle into memory. The tension, the mystery, the shadows, and the surprises were now part of him, shaping his perspective, his confidence, and his understanding of the world. He smiled softly, knowing that while the story had reached its conclusion, the lessons, reflections, and growth would carry forward into every challenge yet to come. And in that quiet moment, FY Teen felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not just for surviving the test, but for embracing it fully, learning, reflecting, and ultimately becoming stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life might ask of him next.